Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Jack, and today we'll be talking about something that can really help you learn English.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena, an expert in the language learning.
Today we're going to explore reading and how it can help you improve your English.
Yeah, reading is a fantastic way to learn.
I know a lot of English learners focus on grammar rules and vocabulary lists,
Right.
and those are important,
Yeah.
but sometimes we forget about just reading for fun.
Exactly. When we read for pleasure, we're not just learning new words.
Right.
We're also getting a feel for how the language is actually used.
One expert said to only read things in English that you would find fun in your own language.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like it should be so easy that you almost feel guilty reading it in English.
That's a great point. If you're reading something you enjoy, you're more likely to stick with it.
Right.
And that's when the real learning happens.
You know, I can totally relate to that.
Mm.
I remember when I first started learning a new language,
Mm.
I picked up some really difficult books.
Oh, yeah.
It was so frustrating and I almost gave up.
I think a lot of learners think they need to start with difficult materials.
Yeah.
But actually, it's much better to start with something simple and enjoyable, even if it feels too easy.
So like are comic books and magazines okay?
Absolutely. The important thing is to choose something you'll enjoy reading.
Okay, so we've been talking about reading for fun,
Right?
but is reading still a good way to learn English these days? I mean, there are so many apps and websites now.
Yeah, technology has definitely changed how we learn,
Right.
but research still shows that reading is one of the most effective ways to learn a language.
Okay.
And it doesn't just improve your vocabulary, it helps with grammar writing and even speaking.
Really? I didn't realize reading could help with speaking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There was a study in Singapore where students who did a lot of silent reading actually did better in English than students who only focused on grammar lessons.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It seems like when we read, we naturally pick up on how the language works.
Right.
Kind of like how children learn their first language.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like our brains are absorbing the language without us even realizing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we know reading is good, but how can we make sure we're getting the most out of our reading?
Well, one important thing is to choose materials that are at the right level for you.
Okay.
Aim for something where you understand about 98% of the words.
98%. That sounds like a lot.
Well, it's about how comfortable you feel while reading.
Okay.
If you're constantly stopping to look up words, you're not going to enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
With 98% comprehension, the reading flows smoothly and you can focus on the story.
Okay, so I shouldn't feel bad about reading easy books.
Not at all.
Yeah.
There are even special books called graded readers that are perfect for English learners.
Graded readers. What are those?
They use simplified language and focus on everyday English.
Okay, so how should I approach reading a book? Should I just read straight through?
One good strategy is to read extensively, but highlight any words or phrases you don't understand.
So just highlight as I go?
Yeah, don't stop to look them up right away.
Okay, and then what?
Once you finish a chapter, you can go back and look up the meanings.
Got it.
But try to highlight the whole sentence. The word is in, not just the single word.
Well, that's a good tip.
And then you can make flashcards out of those sentences.
Flashcards.
Yeah. There's a great app called Enki that uses something called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
What's that?
It helps you learn vocabulary by showing you flashcards at specific intervals.
Oh, so I'm reading for fun, but also studying the words? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a great way to balance reading for pleasure with expanding your vocabulary.
I like that. So we've talked about the importance of choosing the right materials
Right.
and using tools like flashcards.
Yeah.
But how do we stay motivated?
That's where a champion mindset comes in.
A champion mindset.
Just like champion athletes, successful English learners focus on the quantity and the quality of their practice.
Quantity and quality. What does that mean for reading?
It means setting aside some time to read every day, even if it's just for 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, so making reading a habit. Yeah. And choosing engaging and challenging materials.
So it's not just about how much I read,
Right.
but how I read.
Exactly. Champion athletes don't just go through the motions during their training.
Right.
They bring focus, energy, and emotion to every session.
So we should approach our English learning the same way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it.
That's inspiring. What if I feel overwhelmed, though?
Remember, you don't have to do this alone.
Oh, yeah.
There are lots of resources, communities, and even book clubs out there.
It's good to know. So we've covered a lot today.
We have.
But before we move on, let's talk about some practical tips for finding good reading material, especially for beginners.
Okay. What do you enjoy reading in your native language?
I love novels, especially fantasy and science fiction.
You can find a lot of fantasy and science fiction books written in simplified English or as graded readers.
Oh, right. Graded reader.
Yeah, they come in all sorts of genres and levels.
Okay, but what if I don't want to read a whole novel?
You don't have to. Magazines are a great option. They have short articles on lots of topics.
Oh, yeah. I used to love reading magazines.
And don't forget about comics or graphic novels. They can be really helpful for understanding the story.
Because of the pictures.
Exactly. And what about online resources?
I haven't really looked into those too much.
There are so many websites and apps specifically designed for English learners.
Right.
You can find anything from news articles and short stories to interactive exercises.
Wow. There are so many choices.
I know, it can be overwhelming. But start with something that interests you. Don't force yourself to read something just because it seems educational.
That makes sense.
Remember, reading should be enjoyable.
So I found some things that I like. How do I learn as much as possible from my reading?
Well, one technique is to actively engage with the text. Don't just read the words passively.
What do you mean?
Ask yourself questions. Make predictions. Summarize the main points in your own words.
Oh, okay. So make it more interactive.
Exactly. And look for patterns in the language. Notice how words are used together, how sentences are structured.
So it's kind of like studying grammar.
It is, but in a more natural way.
I see.
Then don't be afraid to reread sections or even entire books.
Reread.
Yeah. It lets you pick up on details you missed the first time.
That's a good idea.
And read aloud.
Read aloud.
It helps improve your pronunciation, fluency, and intonation.
I feel a little self-conscious reading aloud.
I understand. But try to find a quiet place where you feel comfortable.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to try different techniques until you find what works best for you.
This has been incredibly helpful, Elena.
Yeah.
I feel much more confident about reading to learn English.
I'm so glad. And remember, consistency is key.
Even a few minutes each day.
Exactly.
We've covered a lot today, Elena.
But have.
From finding the right materials to specific reading strategies.
It's been a great discussion.
Before we move on, though, I want to emphasize one more thing.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
I agree. Mistakes are valuable learning opportunities.
So the more I read, the better I'll get.
Exactly.
This is great. I'm
Well-
feeling much more optimistic about learning English.
I'm happy to hear that. I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
Think about the last book you read and really enjoyed in your native language. Imagine how amazing it would be to have that same experience reading a book in English.
Wow, that would be incredible.
And that feeling is totally achievable.
Elena, thank you so much for this conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, happy reading. We'll be back soon to talk more about choosing the right reading materials.
See you then. Welcome back, everyone.
So we were just talking about how important it is to choose the right reading materials.
Yeah.
And I'm already excited to start exploring some graded readers, especially in the fantasy and science fiction genres.
Oh, those are great genres.
Yeah. But are there any other types of materials that might be good for English learners?
That's a great question, and it reminds me that we often think of reading as just sitting down with a book. But there are so many other ways to get that valuable reading practice.
Like with magazines?
Yeah, magazines are fantastic. They
Yeah.
offer those short articles on all sorts of topics.
Yeah.
So you can choose something that interests you, and it's a great way to learn about different things and improve your English at the same time.
And because they're short, it doesn't feel as overwhelming as like starting a whole novel.
Exactly.
It's a quick way to fit some reading into my day.
And speaking of short and easy, what about comics and graphic novels?
Oh, yeah. Those. I actually haven't read a comic book in years.
Well, maybe it's time to rediscover them.
Yeah.
Remember, the combination of pictures and text can make them really helpful for English learners.
Yeah, because the pictures can help you understand the story even if you don't know all the words.
Right. And comics can be really fun and engaging.
Okay, so we got magazines and comics. Have you thought about online resources?
Oh, yeah. Online resources are great.
Yeah.
There are tons of websites and apps specifically designed for English learners.
What kinds of things can I find on those websites?
Well, you can find all sorts of reading materials,
Yeah.
like news articles, blog posts, short stories, poems.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of these websites have interactive features like quizzes and vocabulary exercises.
It's like having a whole library at my fingertips.
It is, but with so many choices, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
My advice, start by exploring websites that have content related to your interests.
Okay, so if I'm interested in travel, I could look for travel blogs or websites about different countries.
Exactly. Or if you love music, find websites that review albums or interview musicians.
Okay, so I've found some websites that I like.
Mm.
How do I make the most of these online resources?
Well, one helpful approach is to think of online reading as a more active type of learning.
Okay.
Don't just passively scroll through articles. Really engage with the text.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, one thing you can do is highlight words or phrases that are new to you.
Okay.
And some platforms even let you save those words to a personal vocabulary list.
Right, I've seen that.
Yeah, and don't just focus on individual words. Pay attention to the bigger picture as well.
Maybe.
Think about the overall meaning of the article or story.
Okay.
What are the main points? What is the author trying to communicate?
Okay.
And to solidify your understanding, try summarizing the main points of the article in your own words.
So it's about actively engaging with the material and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to interact with the content.
Okay.
A lot of websites have comment sections or forums where you can share your thoughts and questions.
That's cool.
It's a great way to practice your writing skills and learn from other people's perspectives.
So online reading can be just as valuable as reading a physical book.
It can be. But whether you're reading online or offline, the key to success is consistency.
Okay, so make reading a habit.
Yeah, just like brushing your teeth or going for a walk.
But what happens when we encounter something we don't understand?
That's a good question.
Should we stop and look up every single word?
Well, first, try to guess the meaning of the word from the context.
From the context.
Yeah, think about the overall meaning of the sentence or paragraph.
Okay.
And if you're still not sure, then look it up. But don't just rely on a traditional dictionary.
Are there other types?
Yeah, you can use a learner's dictionary.
A learner's dictionary.
Yeah, they use simpler definitions, and they often give examples of how to use the word.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if you see a word that seems really important, write it down in a vocabulary notebook so you can review it later.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and try to use the word in a sentence.
Okay, so we've talked about looking up words and making flashcards.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we can do to improve our vocabulary?
Well, one thing is to focus on building vocabulary in specific areas that are relevant to your interests.
So if I like to travel, I should learn words about airports and hotels.
Exactly. Or if you're learning English for your job, focus on vocabulary related to your industry.
That's a good idea.
And pay attention to word families.
Word families.
Yeah, they're groups of words that share a common root.
Okay.
Like happy, happiness, unhappy, happily.
Okay, I see.
So if you learn the root word, you can understand other words in the same family.
Those are some really helpful tips.
Well,
Elena, I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to approach reading now.
I'm glad. And remember, improving your vocabulary takes time.
So don't get discouraged.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm feeling excited about reading more.
That's great. I think it's the perfect time to talk about some specific strategies that can make your reading practice even more effective.
Okay, I'm ready. What strategies do you recommend?
Well, one of the most important things is to set yourself up for success.
Okay.
Create a comfortable and distraction-free environment.
So find a quiet place. Put away my phone. Make myself a cup of tea.
Exactly. Curl up on the couch with a good book and relax.
Okay, but what if I don't have a lot of time to read?
That's okay. You don't need to read for hours at a time.
Okay.
Even short bursts of reading can be beneficial.
So even just 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah. The important thing is to be consistent.
I can do that. What if I get bored or distracted while I'm reading?
That's a great question. Well, first, make sure you're choosing materials that are interesting to you.
Right, we talked about that.
Yeah, and if you find your mind wandering, take a break or switch to something else.
Okay.
You can always come back to the reading later.
Okay, so it's okay to stop and come back later.
Yeah, and try reading with a pen or highlighter.
To highlight the text?
Yeah, it can help you stay engaged with the material.
Okay.
And it's a great way to review the information later.
Okay. And what about taking notes
Oh yeah, taking notes is a great idea.
while I'm reading?
Yeah, you can jot down any thoughts or questions or summarize the main points.
So it's like having a conversation with the book.
Exactly. And speaking of conversations, have you considered joining a book club?
A book club in English.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Well, book clubs can be a really fun way to improve your English skills.
What happens at a book club?
Well, a group of people get together to discuss a book they've all read.
Oh, okay.
You can talk about your thoughts and feelings, share your favorite parts, and ask each other questions.
That sounds fun, but also a little intimidating.
I understand, but everyone in the book club is there to learn and support each other.
Okay.
You don't have to be an expert to participate.
I might have to work up the courage to do that.
And even if you're not ready for a book club, You can still find other ways to connect with other English learners.
Like what?
Well, many libraries and community centers offer language exchange programs or conversation groups.
Oh, so I could meet up with a native English speaker and practice my speaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get real-world speaking practice.
And learn about different cultures, too.
Right, and don't forget about online communities.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many forums, groups, and websites where you can connect with other English learners.
It's amazing how much technology has changed language learning.
I know, it's really opened up a lot of possibilities.
This has been so helpful, Elena. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to make reading a part of my English learning.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, the most important thing is to find what works best for you and make reading enjoyable.
Yeah, it shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
when you find that sweet spot, the learning happens naturally.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything we can on the topic of reading for English learners.
Yeah, I think so too.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Just this never stop exploring. The world of reading is vast and full of possibilities. So keep trying new things, keep challenging yourself, and keep having fun.
That's a great note to end on. Elena, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure. And to all of our listeners out there, happy reading.
We've talked about a lot today, haven't we?
We have. It's been a great discussion about using reading to learn English.
Yeah. And before we wrap things up, I want to touch on something else that's important for English learners.
Oh, what's that?
It's about finding your own pace and enjoying learning English.
Okay.
Learning English can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Right.
There's just so much to learn,
Yeah.
and it's easy to get caught up in trying to reach fluency.
Yeah. It's like we forget to enjoy actually learning the language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially true with reading. Some people might feel pressured to read really difficult books or read a certain number of pages every day.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But I think it's more important to just find books you enjoy.
I completely agree. Reading shouldn't feel like homework. It should be something you look forward to.
Right. And, it's okay to not understand every single word.
Oh, for sure.
In fact, I think it's good to challenge yourself with books that are a little bit above your level.
I agree. Reading things that are a little challenging can help you learn new words and understand more.
Yeah, but it's important to find a balance.
Right.
You don't want to feel like you're constantly struggling.
If it's too hard, you might get frustrated.
Exactly. And it's okay to use tools like dictionaries or online translators to help you.
Those tools can be really useful.
And don't be afraid to ask other people for help, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
Like a teacher or tutor or a friend who speaks English.
It can make a big difference to have someone to talk to and practice with.
And that brings me to probably the most important advice I can give about learning English.
Okay.
Be patient.
Be patient.
Learning a language takes time and effort. There will be times when you feel frustrated,
That's true.
but there will also be times when you feel really proud of yourself.
Yes, it's important to celebrate those moments.
And just remember,
That-
everyone learns at their own pace.
Right. Some people learn faster than others.
And that's okay.
Evan.
The important thing is to keep going.
Just keep practicing.
Even if you only have a few minutes each day to read,
Those minutes add up over
and
time.
eventually you'll start to see the progress.
Yeah, you'll be surprised by how much you learn.
Your vocabulary will get bigger, you'll understand more, and you'll feel more confident.
And maybe one day you'll even read a whole book in English without any problems.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for all this great information.
You're welcome. It's been fun talking about reading.
And to all of our listeners out there, good luck on your English learning journey.
Keep reading and keep practicing.
Thanks for listening, everyone.